Thank you, Yuli. That was very interesting. I look forward to looking at that conference when I have a chance. Is there a website already up?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Okay. So I love dealing with founders. You always know you're dealing with a founder because they carry around whatever they built with them. Mine is, oh, okay, okay. I try to speak in the mic as much as possible. Okay, don't have to. So my name is Dr. Benjamin Wang. I'm a medical doctor turned medical device entrepreneur. And I've spent the last couple of years developing a medical device. And I'd like to tell you about my journey a little bit, but also about why we're doing what we're doing. So when we think about a medical device too, we want to kind of quantify some of the risks. And our company has basically gone through a lot of these stages and de-risked the venture to a certain point. One of the big issues is, do we have IP? We have multiple patents issued, international patents also. We have a CE mark, we have FDA clearance. Is it manufacturable? Well, we're currently working with a manufacturer that's making about 1,000 of these devices every day. We sell about 200 of them currently here in the Bay Area per month. We have a drop-in solution. Doesn't take a lot of in-servicing to get doctors on board. And we have an interesting partnership that we're working on to basically put this in the hands of a big distributor so they can do a little bit more of the selling and I can do more of the support. But let me tell you a little bit more about my story. Back a couple years, I was at the University of Miami, working at a large county hospital called Jackson Memorial Hospital. And I was seeing a lot of patients come in, have problems, end up on a breathing machine, and then end up with infections afterwards. And while the hospital would report some, many of these infections got lumped into a group of community acquired, or we call it sepsis. But at the end of the day, their outcomes were very poor, and the cost to the hospital was enormous. So turns out this is not an isolated problem. Across the United States and across the world, these ICU pneumonias are also called ventilator-associated pneumonias, or VAPs, are not reported very well in many countries. But at the end of the day, here in the United States, each case costs us $43,000 on average. Now, the longer ones, they can cost upwards of $100,000. Shorter ones can be a little less, but on average, every case, a patient will end up an extra 7 to 11 days in the ICU on a breathing machine. Their mortality is high, and at the end of the day, the health system pays for this. There are about 1 million ventilated ICU patients. Another 4 million patients in the OR that could be utilizing what we've made. And then also some emergency department patients can also utilize this too. And these are key investments for the hospitals. Right now, there's reports coming out that hospitals are really interested in reducing complications and reducing medical error. And these are the two big places where they are investing heavily because those two things hit their bottom line dramatically. The market drivers to this are also very interesting in the United States. Number one, there's no reimbursement for errors anymore or infections. If you're reporting that a patient has a bad outcome, they're also using that as a quality measure. And at the end of the day, the reimbursement across the board is being hit by that too. On top of this, there's also antibiotic resistance. So when a patient gets infections, the infections are getting worse and they're getting more expensive and deadlier to treat. And this is the problem. Back about 10 years ago, we created a breathing tube with one suction port right above the cuff. And it was a great engineering feat, and they did a bunch of studies and they found out this actually prevented some cases of infection. And it was actually proven through meta-analysis to be cost-effective. What also happened is when you actually used this, you had dramatic suction blockage, and it could only be turned on in the ICU. You couldn't take it to patients who were in the OR or the emergency department. They would put the tube in, and by the time they got to the ICU, then they could turn it on. And this is a problem because when they actually turned it on, the clinical experience of this device was that it got blocked It didn't get anything out, and you could only run it at interesting low settings in order to try and get something out. When you you used higher vacuum or you tried to change the settings, it didn't work, and you didn't get very much out. And so the clinical experience of this device was very poor. On top of that, it required expensive additional equipment. There was a risk of trauma. There were additional care and equipment needs. And so hospitals, a lot of them, they tried to move in this direction, but many of them said, you know what, it's just too expensive to do this. So we created one that doesn't have those problems. We created basically a breathing tube that when we tested it in a patient, this is what we found. We found that it was dramatically better, that when you turned it on high, that it would work, versus the other one where if you turned it on high, it wouldn't work. When we did it in a tissue model over 48 hours, this is what we found. The tube that is the gold standard in infection control in the ICU was recovering below 10% of what we were leaking into that model. Whereas the one that we created basically had the ability to remove 95% of what was added in there. Now, if you think of infections as dose-related, that maybe you get 10 bacteria and you don't get an infection, but you get 100, and then you do. This might mean that we can prevent a vast, greater quantity of these infections. It has some obvious benefits that when you pull the predicate device and this device and you put them in front of a doctor, they can very quickly see that one is abrasive and one is not. It doesn't create the same kind of trauma in a patient. And then when they actually use it, they can actually turn the suctioning as high as they need to get very thick bacterial-laden secretions out. It doesn't need the same kind of expensive equipment. It's quieter, which makes a big difference for the families who come in the ICU and hear this nasty slurping sound. It also provides some additional physician benefits in terms of visualization and application of medication, which is very interesting. We didn't anticipate that. Ultimately, we want to be able to prove that it reduces ICU stay, reduces infection risk, decreases the time that a person has to be mechanically ventilated. And that's the real big push in the ICUs today, is to get people off the breathing machine as fast as possible. Ultimately, if it is a successful infection prevention device, we'd like it to reduce antibiotic use and mortality. And those are big studies, but what we can do is commercialize the device and have physicians study it in the field. This is the landscape of what's already out there. What's interesting is this device was recalled. It no longer exists. You can't buy it on the internet. I can't find it. I tried. But basically, we have a solution that costs the same as what is already out there. It just works better, and we can provide better value for hospitals and doctors alike. We have a very experienced team. Our CEO has over 30 years of C-level medical device experience. Dr. Johnson was one of the founders of Salix Pharmaceuticals, the most profitable pharmaceutical company and company in general in history per employee. And we've been commercializing our device since we got our FDA clearance, and we've basically worked out who we have to approach in a hospital. Many times it's the nursing care, respiratory care, infection control in a hospital. We have to convince them that it's something that is worth their time taking a look at. And we've basically worked out a good system of getting in front of the right people to get to that point in which they're ready to make a purchase of the device. At the same time, there are other people in this landscape that also have some critical input that we'd love to get them involved with. Anesthesia, critical care, oftentimes can really push that they want to try something interesting. It has benefits for both of these fields, and we find that having doctors on board that are interested in looking at this really helps the process. Today, we have issued IP on this one device, but we have a whole host of other devices that we can work with our manufacturer that are covered under our IP that we can scale and we can create additional value. We can use the same kind of sales channel that we've developed to develop these other devices alongside what we have already. And over the course of the last couple of years, we've been able to really do what other medical devices companies haven't, which is develop our device and our product portfolio in a very lean fashion. We were able to basically do this on a shoestring budget. So in summary, we are addressing the number one concern of U.S. and international hospitals today, which is complications and infections. Everybody knows that healthcare has to get leaner and meaner and has to do a better job in terms of quality. And this is the principal place where hospital systems are investing today. We have a scalable drop-in solution, which doesn't require a lot of training and in the right hands can be commercialized dramatically. We have a capital efficient model where we don't actually have a manufacturing facility. We don't hire personnel to build the device. We've completely outsourced the work that we are doing today. You know, our product has a 85% gross margin at this point in time. We think we can actually boost that further. We have a very experienced team. We know what healthcare looks like. We know what selling into a hospital looks like, and we've been doing it for the past year. And we are working on some very, very interesting partnerships. We've identified a company that actually needs this specific device in their entire product line, and we're working with them to commercialize through their network and their contracts. So it is a very exciting time for us. We're looking for a little bit of bridge financing at this point to support the partnership. We've raised about $100K in the last, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks to kind of support this. We'd also like some introductions. This is a Sutter-approved device, so we'd love to talk to somebody at Altabates about seeing if we can do a trial.
Anesthesia?
Anesthesia, exactly. But any introductions to any people who work in infection control, critical care, ICU, we'd love to set up a no-cost trial and basically show you that the device works and works better than what you are already using today. And that it's a very important thing to kind of support our partnership. So please come to talk to me afterwards. Here's my contact information, and I'd love to get in touch with you. Thank you. Yeah, so any questions? So the regular device is stuck doing suctioning between 25 and 30 on continuous. When you buy a special pressure regulator, which is like $3,000 per patient, you're able to do intermittent suctioning, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, at about 100. Our device right now is being utilized in a couple Bay Area hospitals. We're using 200 continuous, and we have people who actually are not afraid to turn it on to 250 or even 300 sometimes. Yes.
It doesn't cause tissue injury or entrapment?
It doesn't, and
Multiple holes
it has 24 smaller holes. The actual total surface area is the same, but the holes are between 2 millimeters and 1 millimeter. The pressure is the key. The higher pressure is the key. Yeah. So at those pressures, I can play around with it. I can suction motor oil and honey out of it. So I'm pretty confident that it handles stuff like it. Yeah, some blood, not my blood, but seen it do it. So far, we've had a patient utilize it for over a week, about a week and 3 days. We have never had a complication yet. We had a patient who inhaled a hot dog, an entire hot dog. It didn't handle a hot dog well. So it does not design for that. But other use cases, it has not had any problems at this point. You'd be surprised. You see everything in medicine. So, yes.
trauma patients with kind of facial trauma?
Not specifically. Right now, we're only in a couple community hospitals. UC Davis Medical Center has trialed a couple of them, so we hope, knock on wood, that there'll be some trauma patients that will be able to utilize it soon.
Which ICUs use this in the Bay Area?
Couple on the peninsula, one in Marin. Right, yeah.
I know it got Altabates ICU.
Oh, so I need to talk to you. And it's a Sutter-approved device, has a Larson number, so it's easy. Okay, great. Okay.